Good morning, everybody, and welcome back to your Lunch Break Live. My name is Ivana Herenque if you are new here, and if you're not, thank you for coming back. Today is Wednesday, November the 17th, and today we're going to talk about the latest lawsuit that Alabama's Attorney General Steve Marshall has joined in on regarding the federal vaccine mandates. Now, there are three separate lawsuits. I'm sure that you think we sound like a broken record right now because we've talked about this multiple times, but this is a new lawsuit. Now, Steve Marshall joined in on this on Monday. And again, this is just slightly different from those other two lawsuits. So we're going to break that down today and explain a little bit about the differences in these cases and what is next. So today I am joined by our state politics editor, Kent Faulk. And Kent has spent many years covering courts and especially federal courts where we know these cases are going to be litigated in. So Kent, thank you for joining us today. I think probably the most clear way to do this is to talk about the lawsuits separately. So let's go ahead and talk about the one that happened on Monday. We're going to start at the latest one and work our way backwards. So for the lawsuit that happened on Monday, tell us a little bit about that and what Steve Marshall did.
Okay. Steve Marshall, the Attorney General of Alabama, joined with, I believe it was 7 other states in a lawsuit to block the Biden administration's Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, want to get that right, commonly called CMS. CMS had mandated America's healthcare workers are to be vaccinated or lose their jobs by January 4th, I believe, is the date, the timeline with all the other mandates too. And they point out, looking at the differences in the different mandates we've had, that, Marshall points out that unlike the private employees mandates and the federal contractors mandates, that they don't offer in this mandate opportunity for testing, unlike the private the mandate for private employers who employ 100 or more. In those mandates, in that mandate, it allows for weekly testing.
Right. Now, this lawsuit that, again, Steve Marshall joined in on Monday, it's just around those healthcare workers that you mentioned. Now, I've got a couple of facts I'm going to look down to make sure I get those right as well. But this part of the mandate, so this is all under the one federal mandate, right? But these are kind of 3 different portions. So think about it as like 3 different buckets. So this bucket is for healthcare workers. And again, this affects more than 17 million healthcare workers in more than 76,000 healthcare facilities and home healthcare providers. Now, these healthcare workers are working for institutions that receive funding from CMS or the Centers for Medicaid and Medicare Services. So you look at all of those healthcare workers, this part of the mandate says, if you are working in this setting, and there are some exceptions, I can pull them up here on my phone while we talk, but these people, it does not matter if you are working as somebody at the desk, if you are working as the nurse who is directly in contact with the patients, it doesn't matter your role. If you are working in one of these centers, you must be vaccinated against COVID-19 from one of these 3 approved vaccines. And you don't have that option for getting a negative COVID test, as you mentioned, Kent. Now, Steve Marshall enjoined on this lawsuit with several other states that is going into the federal courts. And Ken, I'll let you explain a little bit more about that. But it's important to note that while this is probably going to be a kind of long-term game in the courts, we know nothing really happens fast. January 4th is that deadline for people to go ahead and get vaccinated, or in this bucket of those healthcare workers, lose their job.
Correct. That's why they call it a mandate. And that's why some states, particularly Republican leadership in those states, have pushed against it.
Right.
So it's you've got basically, as we've talked about, 3 different types of mandates, each coming from separate federal agencies. Marshall, filed was with the other states, filing the latest one on Monday, regarding the healthcare workers and everything. But previously, over the past month, he had been involved with filing with other states on, let's see, starting with October 9th, 29th, to block the federal contractor vaccine mandate.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about that one and how that is different. So we mentioned again, there's three different ones. We've talked about one, which is the healthcare workers. That was this week. Now let's go backwards to, I believe it was the 29th of October.
Yeah.
So late last month, let's talk about this lawsuit Steve Marshall joined in on regarding the federal contractors.
Right. So if you're a company that works with the government, has a contract with the federal government, you are required to have all your employees vaccinated. They've moved that date around. Originally, it was December 8th. Now it's January 4th. They've extended to that date. And there's no opportunity for testing in that mandate either, where you can have weekly testing, that kind of thing. So you have
And
that.
something I'm sorry to interrupt you, Kent. Something I wanted to say quickly is we talk about federal contractors, and there's probably many people, and I was like this, I know, in the beginning, where we said contractors, and it's like, well, what exactly does that mean? There's not really that many federal contractors, right? But that language is kind of misleading, because basically that means anybody who gets any federal money, that is a person who is considered a federal contractor. So we know that some of our universities in the state, the University of Alabama, Auburn University, the University of Alabama at Birmingham, they all get some federal money, so they are considered federal contractors. So that contractor word can be a little bit deceiving.
Yeah, there are thousands and thousands across the United States of federal that would be considered, federal contractors, and so they're all under the gun to get that done. And we've even had one of those is United Launch Alliance. They're a federal contractor that is under the gun to get their employees vaccinated, and that's the rocket plant up at Decatur. And some of the employees up there have been protesting, and a group of 5 employees just on Friday filed a lawsuit protesting that mandate and over not getting religious or medical exemptions. So we've got that going on in our backyard. And so the federal contractors, they're far and wide, and different things. So from defense to like universities, like you mentioned.
Well, universities, and I'm glad you mentioned that plant up in Decatur, because we look about the kind of bookends of our state. Ken, I know we're both in central Alabama, but you look at North Alabama and you look at all the ties to the space industry that Huntsville and all of these surrounding towns have. And again, like you said, making rocket ships, making things that go along with rocket ships, things that are way above my knowledge, but things that have to be used in the space industry. Then you look at South Alabama and you look at places that make ships for the Navy. You look at other places in South Alabama, the ports and other things that also receive federal money. So we are very much a state that has a lot of places that are federal contractors. And again, don't let that word deceive you, that you don't have to be a builder to be a contractor, right? We are not talking about contractors in that sense.
Correct. So
and you talk
about a research grant, that kind of thing. So.
Right. And I'm looking through as everybody's putting in their comments. If you have questions here, please comment them below. I'm trying to look as we go. But, that's also somebody had mentioned about the, what happens if you don't get the shot there. Right. So we've got in those 2 lawsuits we've talked about, the one that covers healthcare workers that receive Medicare and Medicaid funding, and then the one that is also the federal contractor we've been talking about. You don't have an option for getting a negative COVID test. Right. You must be vaccinated to work at those places. Otherwise, the businesses are saying, look, we can't employ you.
Yeah. And it appears they also are not under the mandate allowing an antibodies test that says I have the antibodies, even though I haven't had the COVID shots. So that issue has come up. But then you've got the other lawsuit we haven't talked about is the private employers lawsuit, which is the mandate filed by OSHA, Occupational Safety and Health Administration, and that mandate, about the 100, those with businesses with 100 employees or more, and that's whether you have a contract or not with the federal government. In fact, this is a non-federal contractor mandate, and that does allow you, in lieu of a fully vaccinated worker or workforce, allows for testing, weekly testing. But Steve Marshall also has joined in on a lawsuit well, it's more of a contesting a complaint filed against the agency OSHA, and that'll be that's treated like a lawsuit, and that was filed on November 5th, and just yesterday there was a decision by the federal courts to consolidate all of the lawsuits involving the OSHA or challenges to the OSHA mandate under one circuit court in Ohio, the 6th district. So that one court will handle all of the employer OSHA complaints about that mandate. So I guess we'll have to see where that goes. But that, as has been noted in an Associated Press article regarding that is a Republican-dominated bench on the 6th Circuit. So they point that out. In fact, as to say that it may have more of a conservative, anti-mandate leaning. So.
And that's interesting to note. And also something interesting you said here was talking about the federal lawsuits here. And it's important to note that all three of these lawsuits, and even the one that we're calling lawsuit loosely, right? It's an OSHA complaint, but all three of these complaints are going through the federal court system. They are not going through courts here in Alabama.
Correct. They were not filed in federal court here. The three that Steve Marshall notes, and the state has joined. One of them was filed in Georgia, I believe, federal court. And anyway, just to point that out, that we're in a raft with other states, so to speak. So.
Right. And something too that we should notice for all three of these different situations, all three of these buckets, right? That deadline for getting the vaccination is January the 4th. So that means, again, at least for the CMS part of this, and then for the federal contractor part of this, have to have had your vaccines by January the 4th. Now, if you look at the places that are regulated by OSHA, those businesses that have 100 or more employees, and even if they don't receive federal funding, they're private businesses who have that option for testing. That also is January the 4th. So Kent, I know that OSHA has not released its full policies. They've released some of their kind of facts around this mandate. They have said that employers do not have to pay for testing, for this negative COVID testing for people to come back to work. We are going to get a little bit more of that policy, we expect, in the coming weeks. But again, January 4th is that deadline, and that's coming up pretty quick.
Yes. And it takes, you have to wait between the two shots. So, you've got to be fully vaccinated by January 4th, you would have to pull it back, 2 weeks before that for getting your first shot. So, you got to plan around it if you're an employee in one of those situations.
Right. This is definitely a calendar game here, because you make a good point about saying if you have to have that second shot by January the 4th, then you have to have had your first shot sometime in December, assuming that you're getting either Moderna or Pfizer instead of Johnson & Johnson. You have to get that first shot sometime in December, plan it out well enough that you can have your second vaccine on or before January the 4th. So like you said, it's really a calendar game here. We know a lot of people start taking time off for the holidays, and that's probably not the thing that is closest to their mind, right? They're probably trying to think a little bit more about the holiday season and not that they've got to go to their local grocery store or drugstore, convenience store to get that vaccine. Now, looking through some of these questions here as well, and while I do that, can we briefly talk about the speed, the snail's pace, which sometimes things move through court? Do we expect there to be any bombshell news by January the 4th?
I would definitely expect in all three lawsuits that there will be movement by the federal courts, because we're talking about some agency mandates that that have deadlines, hard and fast deadlines, and there are requests by the plaintiffs to get this resolved quickly. And the federal courts probably will move fast on this because you've got these January 4th deadlines. Now, what the courts could do is come in and issue temporary orders saying that the deadlines have to be extended. It would surprise me if something to that effect happened, to give them more time to analyze briefs submitted by both sides of the issue, all sides. Maybe there's more than one side, two sides. So I would expect some movement before January 4th by the courts on this. Now, whether it's bombshell that they totally do away with the mandates and say that these federal agencies do not have the right to do that or can't do it, or whatever legal argument they come up with, there will be. This is all kind of, I don't want to say unprecedented in terms of national mandates on vaccines, but I mean, because we do have the blue cards for schools that most school systems have and everything, but this may bring everything to a head.
Absolutely. And I want to quickly point out, somebody had asked in our comment thread here about that December deadline. Said, wait, I thought the deadline was in December. So you're right. The deadline was in December. It has since been moved back to January the 4th. So if in your head you had that December deadline, you're not wrong. That just has since been changed to January the 4th. Now, we know this information coming out is changing a lot. So you can keep up with all of that on AL.com, especially for all of this Alabama related news with these lawsuits that Steve Marshall has enjoined. You can also find all of our coronavirus coverage at AL.com/coronavirus. You'll find everything there on this topic. So, Kent, thank you for coming to break this down a little bit, to kind of clear up the fact that, yes, these are three separate complaints. They all deal with one thing, but three separate parts.
Right.
Kent, thank you. Thank you again, everybody watching. Thank you so much. If you have questions, feel free to leave them in the comments. I will go back through and try to get as many of those answered as we can. Again, thank you so much for watching, and we will see you tomorrow.